Jim, this one was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Julio in Costa Rica.
Down by the schoolyard?
No, in Costa Rica, not by the schoolyard. That's in Queens.
Well, no, they have schools in Costa Rica.
In the song, they're talking about Corona, Queens.
Well, he could still be down by the schoolyard even if he's in Costa Rica.
Well, let's go to Julio's
It's not
question.
the same schoolyard.
Recently, I've been rewatching old TNA programs and found myself viewing 2007's America Most Wanted breakup. It all happened when James Storm broke a bottle of alcohol in Chris Harris's face, resulting in Harris being blinded in one of his eyes. The storyline then played out with you, Jim, refusing to put Harris in a match with Storm, since it would be unfair, since Harris can't properly see, and after much deliberation, Jim does put them in a match. A blindfold match at the pay-per-view. Before the bell even rang, the crowd was loudly chanting "Fire Russo," and what followed was a slow-paced and confusing match that killed the crowd. They only popped when the blindfold fell off, but then booed loudly when the referee put it back on.
Put it back on.
May I know, what was the reasoning in TNA management for booking this match the way it was booked? And what do you remember, if anything, about who put the match together? I understand you weren't in charge of everything in TNA, so I find it interesting to ask who was behind this idea in the first place. Side note, the match that followed this one between the two was a fantastic Texas death match that Harris ended up winning at Sacrifice 2007. Very entertaining match.
That match was one of the better TNA matches that anybody ever had during that period of time, much less just Harris and Storm. The Texas Death match that they had second was a wrestling match, and they were great wrestlers, and they had complemented styles with each other very well, and they had a great match, one of the better matches in TNA history, which followed a complete abortion, which the questioner just asked about. And who do you think was behind that? Who was the person that had the Hood of Death match blindfold with Jake Roberts in the WWF in 1987?
Oh, no.
Was it
Rick Martel in 91?
Or 91. Okay, not 87, 91. Rick Martel and Jake Roberts, WWF, the bad parts of WWF. That was people that in New York that lived there and aspired to own video stores and weren't getting laid. And that's the only thing they remembered was the idea itself. They didn't remember that those were also stinker matches, all the blindfold matches, because guys didn't know how to work them. Mostly stinker matches. I had a childhood fondness for the blindfold battle royal, but that was for spot shows. Nevertheless, I was being a good soldier making that match on television in my capacity as on-air authority figure, but I had nothing to do with it, neither booking it nor setting it up. I can't remember who the agent was, but it didn't make any difference, because once you've painted yourself into that predicament, I mean, all the agent can do is say, well, here's the 3 or 4 blindfold spots and the general kind of way you work it, but they didn't have the right blindfold, the right kind of blindfold. It fell off. It was typical of, and that's when they did chant "Fire Russo." The only time I remember them chanting "Fire Russo" louder was during that last rites match with Sting and Abyss, where they were supposed to put one or the other on the platform and lift them to heaven, because Sting was religious and Russo was religious and Abyss just wanted a fucking pay-per-view match. So they had to bring God into it. And then that's also when the Abyss stabbed Sting in the face and almost put his eye out, because they had plastic candelabras on the corners of their funeral home type setting. And they thought it'd be a good idea if they broke one of those over Sting's head. And the people chanted "Fire Russo" then too. It was fucking rotten. And
is it true that Dixie would get upset when they would chant "Fire Russo"?
Well, she said that. Somebody asked her on one of the kayfabe commentaries interviews, said, something about when they chant Fire Russo, why don't you take that to heart? And she'd say, well, that's because when they would chant Fire Russo, half the time it wasn't even his idea. Unfortunately, it actually kind of was. She just either didn't know what his idea was or didn't want to admit what his idea was or didn't know enough about the wrestling business to know that there's a difference between the people that have an original idea for something and the lunatic moron that she had actually fucking writing the television show. So they didn't try to have a stinker, but it turned out that way. If they'd had obviously you don't have a Texas death match first after you break up, but you don't have a blindfold match either first after you break up. If they'd have had a nice little 3-match series, Storm was already over. Harris would have got over better. This kind of put Harris on the path to no return.